I would be happy.
Angela, we are welcome. We are on page 26 of the Little Atheist book, and we're discussing those. We actually already talked about, actually on page 27. We already, no, we're on 26. We're already did the first claim on number 7. It says, what were some of the fascinating claims that came from the legendary astronomer and agnostic Robert Jastrow? And the claim number 1 from page 77 is that the universe is like a wound up clock, and somebody must have wound it. So now we're on number 2, claim number 2 from page 82. What was it that Robert Jastrow said there? Ben? Yeah, so the radiation discovered precisely supports a Big Bang. An instantaneous and powerful is too strong a word, or too weak a word. Explosion into being. So that ends any argument that or steady state is what they call it, but that the universe is always and it's unchanging. Claim number 3 on page 84. Grace?
Astronomical evidence leads to the elliptical origin of the world.
This is an agnostic. He doesn't know if there's a God, but he's saying that the scientific evidence, the astronomical evidence, leads to a biblical view of origin. They are consistent with them. The science, don't ever let anyone tell you that what we believe, we ignore science. The science says the same thing as the Bible says. And then claim 4. That's the same thing, isn't it? What does it say? Yeah, Kate.
It is a scientifically proven fact that
Yeah, so the science leads to a view that there's supernatural forces at work in creation. We use the word creation. Yeah, that's a weird thing for a scientist to use, a weird word, but he's saying that's what the science tells us. And then, what about claim? Are we on claim 5? 5. Okay, great. Claim 5 from page 88. Okay, what else did you see there? I've got a bunch of stuff. Okay, the universe is caused by something outside of space and time.
when our beliefs are in conflict with evidence, we become irritated and the conflict doesn't exist.
Right, right. So atheistic astronomers have in the words of this book, painted themselves into a corner because their own methods have proved a very sudden beginning to the existence, a very sudden beginning, and the existence of the supernatural is now scientifically proven. And then scientists act very much like everyone else when the evidence doesn't support what they behave. They get irritated. In fact, wasn't the called an irritating factor? They didn't like humans. You get irritated when your parents don't give you the answer. Number 8. Summarize the definition offered by Arthur Eddington of the second law of thermodynamics. What do you say? Okay, yeah. So what's the word you use there? Matter and energy. I'm sorry, I thought you said. Were you going to add something, Davis?
I wrote the
Okay. So the second law is entropy increases. Now, what is entropy? Yeah, it means it's running down. And it's the highest law of nature. So if any theory contradicts it, that theory is doomed. Because the second law of thermodynamics, that energy runs down. I think they used the example of a car. If you just leave the car running forever, what's going to happen? Long before forever, right? You're going to run out of gas. It's going to stop. So that's part of the second law. What I always think about with this is another car analogy. And I don't think I've told you this. I think I told you last year's June. We were driving in our really nasty van on Corporal Road. We were actually right in front of South Road. This was years ago. Josh was little. And we passed a car that was a top of the line Cadillac about 20 years later. And the vinyl roof was flapping in the wind, and it was about 6 colors, and it had been in several wrecks. And Josh made a comment about, that car is worse than ours, or that car is, that's an ugly car or something. And I said, Josh, when that thing was new, that was the nicest car on the road. One of the nicest cars on the road. He said, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was. That's entropy, right? And the longer thing was, I'm a living example of entropy, right? That things wind down. You can wind something up, but it's going to run down. So that's the second law of thermodynamics, and it's true of the universe as well. How does the expanding universe prove a beginning? Yes, the science says it started at a single point, and they can actually look into space, and it's like watching a movie backwards, right? It all goes back to a single point in the distant reaches of the universe and in the distant past. So the expanding universe assumes a beginning. If I'm drinking water and Lucas says something really funny, and I spit it all out of my mouth, right? And it hits him in the face. He's going to be really upset at me, and he's going to make me go take a COVID test. But if that happens, he assumes that didn't come from nowhere, right? That there had to be a starting point. That's kind of what the universe is. I will not do that. Okay. What are some of the views espoused by atheists that offer explanations of the existence of the universe? Yes. Yeah, what does that say? Yeah, like an accordion, right? They play the accordion strings. But what's wrong with that? Where's the single point come from? And even if that were true, right? The science says it was created in an instant from a single point, and it's expanding. So it ignores the science. All of these ignore the science. What does imaginary time? What is that theory? You really have to ignore something. What does imaginary time say? Okay, but what are they saying about imaginary time? Yeah.
something about things on.
Yeah, but there's no such thing as time. It's only imaginary. And the book calls that an imaginary theory. I know there's probably some of you who would like there to be no such thing as time. Oh, school's out. But yeah, that's an imaginary theory. And then what's another one? Davis. Yeah, it's saying that the law of causality has an exception, except for the law of causality doesn't have an exception. If you get pulled over by the cops for speeding, I hope you don't, and you tell him, but I'm the exception, what's he going to say, or she going to say? You're not. There are no exceptions. So, um, by the way, if you wouldn't mind praying for Josh. At some point, he was first on the scene of that double fatality. One of the first times he tried to pass it off when I told him. 17-year-old man, 40-year-old man, Western, 264. An accident between a van, very sad. But yeah, the law of causality does not have an exception. And then what's the last one? This is the one that Stephen Hawking believed. No, that's the one we just talked about. We talked about that. What? I'm glad you're listening. One more. You don't know? You don't have it? Okay. What is it? Or maybe it's not in the book, and I just added it here. Multiverse. Multiverse, which is that there are multiple universes, and one of them spawned our universe. But again, there's no proof of that. Yeah, and I'm sure what it is. Okay, number 11. In the end, why don't these atheistic theories adequately explain the existence of the universe? Yeah. Yeah, the law of causality is preeminent. You can't have science without the law of causality. Science is the search for causes. So the universe had a beginning, and therefore it needs a cause. Case closed. If we're going to use science, real science. So, and then secondly, the truth can't be found if we begin with an assumption that something can't be. We can't know for sure that we found the truth unless we allow all answers to be possible, right? That's what you're doing on the ACT test when you slash things that aren't. You're checking to see, is this the answer? No. Is this, you don't rule any of them out without looking, right? And so truth can't be found by beginning with there is no God, because you've just ruled out a possible answer. They have no reason to not believe in God, or a first cause. Call it a first cause, because we haven't established yet what that first cause is. And if you rule that out, then you're never going to find that answer, because if it had a beginning, it had a cause. Okay, here's where we get to the brain smoking part of this class. What is the Kalam argument and why is it important? Let's start with just stating the Kalam argument. Yes.
Number of days.
Okay, that's number one. What's number two? Okay, history being a collection of days. And then number three. Here's the thing about eternity. And this is the best way I can explain it. It took me until last year to figure this out. Mostly I was just I don't get it. For eternity to be eternity, it has to go both ways. And so the universe can't be eternal because it has a beginning, right? So it's a philosophical line of argument. the beginning of the universe. So we're not using the science. We're saying that an infinite number of days has no end in both directions. But today is the end of history. We don't know if it continues on. We can't assume that. And so there can't be a number of infinite days before today. Does that help? I know it's hard, but it's proof that it's philosophical proof that supports the science, the beginning of the universe. Now, will there be an infinite number of days? Not for the universe. It will end, right? It will have it has a beginning and it will end. So that's the philosophical argument that supports the science. Okay, let's look at the engaged questions. What fatal mistake did the physics professor make in regarding the second law, and how did Dr. Geisler respond to it? What did he say, first of all? Every law has an exception. And then how did Dr. Geisler respond to him? Yeah. Right, it's self-defeating. What if the second law is the exception to the rule of exception? Because he was stating every law has an exception as a law. We don't know that every law has an exception. We say that. And then how do you know that that is the exception? He wanted it to be. But when somebody says every law has an exception, they don't know which exception it is. He didn't know which exception it is. He was using the second law, thermodynamics, for his interests. So he got the scientists to admit that he had faith in magic. Some scientists, right, have faith in magic. What fatal mistake did Dr. Peter Atkins make regarding the beginning of the universe? And how did both Dr. Craig and Ravi Zacharias correct him? First of all, what did Peter Atkins say? How did Peter Atkins say that the universe came into being? Yes. Random mathematical points swirling in space. What's wrong with that? It's not nothing. And the science says that there was no space and time. Now, God is something, that's right, but it had to be something outside of space and time. Mathematical points are not outside of space and time. So it could have been those as well. So it's not nothing. How would you respond to someone who asks you, who made God? Great question. God's not come to be. He has no beginning. He has no end. And yes. Right. And he doesn't need a cause because he's outside of space, right? Because he's outside of the universe, he doesn't need a cause. In fact, either the universe or something outside of the universe must be eternal for the universe to exist. That's just logic. If the universe is not eternal, then something outside of the universe must have cause. So all the evidence points to the universe having a beginning. And if it had a beginning, it had a began. That's not who you but if it had a beginning, it had a beginning. Any questions on this? None? Okay, so I'm going to give you the rest of the hour, which is about 15 to 18 minutes. I think maybe was, I don't know, about that. And use that time wisely on your study guide. By study guide, I mean the one I handed out to you. Because you'll be happy that you did a good job. Not sure. Angela?